So our main key question with this is, how do we value home language and language varieties and build on them while learning standardized English without demeaning students' linguistic and cultural background? Right? So we're all going to have insights about how that's been done well, what the challenges are, and we're going to bring some of those out today. Something that's really important for us as we go through the next 2 days and then our meetings in the subsequent months is, who are your students? What should we know about them? Right? People have different ideas about how much information is necessary about that individual student or that population or that school. And what Christine and I want to know most of all is, what is the best way for us to learn about you all? Right? So we're going to start to do that with some language variation kind of practices. That's why we like to move about and listen. And so that's going to have our theme today. So we've got these from your survey. Have you noticed different varieties of English? Well, some people had noticed that students use African American English, Southern vernacular in some schools, and that's not accepted in others, right? Some schools had different varieties from across the world, of not just within English, but across languages, right? So there's a lot going on that we've seen already in this group, just from the small survey that we gave. What we have done is we've given you our text. It's in your awesome bag. And it is chock full of strategies and information kind of across the K-316 section. So with a great grant from the National Science Foundation, it's allowed us to go out and see what's most pertinent in different specific communities and schools, based on kind of things that we have pulled from the literature and our previous research. And the most exciting thing is the follow-up to this book that was requested is specifically going to be designed for high school English, right? And they want educators to write vignettes, models, ideas, things that have worked, things that are still challenges into the next text. So we're hoping that you all will look through this one, see what resonates, see what information you still need, and that will be fed right immediately into the next text. So I'm off this whole year to wander the state, to listen to people, and kind of gather this information. So it's exciting to see these things to tie in. And elements for reluctant readers, students making this transition, that is the key group that we're targeting. So the synergy between CERN and this for us has been completely amazing. The big thing we want to think about today is the significance of mismatches. Constant failures between students, educators, parents, and the school system as a whole for students with diverse backgrounds. And thinking about when you mismatch, when you don't fit kind of that model, whether it be a mandate from the state or a classroom norm, how that leads to general disillusionment with education over time. Lower rates of achievement, cycles of misbehavior. I had a wonderful study we did here in Williamsburg, James City County about misbehavior and language, right? When you think you're doing what you're supposed to do, maybe some of the time, right? And how that language plays out in the classroom. And then how that educational effect then goes on into occupational attainment. Really thinking about what you could be, right? And sometimes we hear it right from the start of that person's mouth. As soon as they open their mouth, we've seen that people will have ideas about what that student can or can't learn and what that student can or can't be across their lifetime. So really thinking about how this plays into the achievement gap and really turning that into an opportunity gap. Thinking about what opportunities students have had to read, write, to speak to others, to learn different varieties, what that's looked like is kind of that symbolic overlap. And we talk about that extensively in our text. So we're really thinking about what mismatches occur in speech and in writing in your classrooms as something that our linguistic information can help with. Where structural differences cause problems for certain students, and we've gone through the SOL, we've gone through other major assessments of reading and writing, and we'll do a little practice tomorrow even from AP English model. And then thinking about what are the best ways to help educators and students approach language in culturally and sociolinguistically informed ways. So this idea of knowing what a language is for students we think is critical. Now I'm going to practice this by having you all think of different scenarios. Linguistic and grammatical competence is still huge, especially in the English classroom. We bear huge burdens of making sure students can write effectively, not just for the English classrooms, but across the curriculum. So knowing those parts of language, noun, verbs, prepositions, how to put it together, we're saying it's separate from communicative competence. knowing what to say in a given situation. So I want you to think now of someone who has great linguistic competence, can write and speak in standard all day, but they never quite get that timing right or say that thing they're supposed to say in that given moment. It may be someone who may be perceived as awkward, or maybe that one person who talks a little bit too much, right? There's one model of that. And you may have students who tell interesting stories, they're the center of attention, but getting that grammar correct, that writing theme, there's some mismatch between their fluidity in speaking and in that written variety. So thinking about those two parts are what we're going to kind of imagine. Now imagine that you've had students on both sides of that and some students who are squarely in the middle. So what we're going to do is think about even splitting that up into dialect, varieties that are characteristic of a particular group. And again, many dialects and social groups represented here today. Register, knowing what is characteristic of a particular situation, and an accent, sound-related variation within a given language. Now, if you're from the South, like me and Christine, all these get melded together, right? So people say, well, you have a Southern accent, right? And that concept of what does that even mean when someone says you have a Southern accent is really a large area of study, but exploration. What does that mean in our classrooms now? So the case for learning language features, so we can separate linguistic competence, grammatical, accent, dialect, and register. It's really important so students have a clear understanding when we say speak in the school variety, when we speak in the standard variety, we can help them understand exactly what we mean. So we're going to practice some of these different language features. Okay, we're going to put some up. I want you to know that some will be sound related, some will be grammar, right? Some will kind of go into prosody and discourse, and some will be lexicon related as well. And I want you to think about, have you heard them before? Have you heard them in your classroom, right? Are there things that you may say, either in your classroom or in your home community? And some of them it's like chalk, reaching down a chalkboard, right, when we hear them. When we hear them or when we see them written. And that's something that we want to talk about because we're going to have different sentiments on that based on our own dialects, our own register, and our own accent. So, the first one I always do is the act alternation. Think about it. Have you heard it? We hear it all around Virginia. In class, outside of class. As a kindergartner, I lost a good recess on this. Recess time, right? As my kindergartner had to drill it into me. So I always thought that one now, professor, I can do what I want, right? And thinking about the language variety that includes this act alternation. Historically, there were two English verbs. Some of you might already know that, right? And we don't know why there were two. We don't know why one fell out of favor. But we see that legacy not only in the United States, but across the world. Now what I want you to do is pronounce it both ways, right? Because a lot of times we'll have the correction go in the one direction. But our argument is we've got to start thinking about hearing it, seeing it, and really feeling sometimes how hard it is to change that variety. So go ahead and say it to someone in your neighbor. Act. Some of it sounds real natural to me. That's right. Some of you all teaching classes where this never comes up. Others here, and some of you maybe one or two schools. Right? The consonant R can sound more like a vowel, and we have all kinds of alternations across the state. So we might hear hurry as hurry, something like that. Hurry up. Bird in some varieties is boy. Okay. The next one is more common across the state. That's for as foe. And father, we hear mother, father. The next one, Christine, you'll do that one because you've got that good.
So these are ones that I grew up with. Words like oil and all, but sound like all.
Try it out. I'll try it. That's a good one. All.
Into that one sound. might hear pin and pin, all right, where you can't really tell the difference. Words like went and went, like went, and maybe like, went would have the same pronunciation. Words like since and since might both be pronounced like since. So go ahead and try those out at your table so you can hear that.
Now the tricky one with this one is sometimes we think we say it one way, and it takes the neighbor to tell us how we actually pronounce it. Right. So you got to try it out. May be reduced, right? So fine may sound like fine. Cold may sound like cold, right? So again, thinking about sometimes we see these as errors, peerless errors, typographical errors, but we start to think of them as patterns, language-based material. A TH, in the state of Virginia can be D, T, S, S, E. Right? So we got with, right? They, alternating some of us all day long as we hear those. And really start to tune that ear in and say, for a lot of these, students don't say it the same alternate way all the time. That variation is happening. And that's a critical piece of this, that they're changing constantly for the speaker. The frequency with which they use these features really makes that target hard to center in on. All right, this is another one you got to try. S can sound like D before N or M. So isn't as isn't. Wasn't as wasn't. Right? How do we feel when we hear it? How do we feel if we see it? So bad can sound like that or bat, right? That's another one for a lot of us with the kind of, when we hear it, we try to get that enunciation to happen. But thinking about that as a systematic